I'm Henny B, and welcome to the World War I Stories podcast, where history comes alive through the voices of those who lived it. Some scenes in these stories may be too graphic for sensitive listeners, so listener discretion is advised. Hey everyone, I'm Henny B, the host of the World War I Stories podcast. Nope, I'm not reading a story right now. Now that this podcast has produced its third episode, I thought I would pop on in here and tell you a little bit about myself and what motivated me to create this particular podcast in the first place. I would like to start off by thanking everyone who's taken the time to download and listen to my show. I appreciate it more than I could ever express. If you've left a rating or comment on whichever platform you download the show on, I profusely thank you for that as well. And please share this show with all your history-loving friends. So let's get started, shall we? As previously mentioned, I am Henny B. Not only do I write all of these episodes, but I also produce and record them on my own. Where? Well, in my garage, in a little nook that I like to call my pod cave. No, these are not true stories, but I do feel that the scenarios described in these stories are very plausible. When I first started to write these stories, I did so with the goal of putting them all in a book. But I'm a big fan of audiobooks and thought to myself one night, why not record them yourself? Make your own audiobook and put it out as a podcast. That weekend, I did just that. I polished up the first episode, Echoes of Silence, locked myself in the garage with my laptop and microphone, and here we are. As you can all probably tell, after listening to the first few episodes of this podcast, I am not a professional voice actor. I cannot do justice to accents, so I don't even try. I also would have a hard time remembering which voice I subconsciously assigned to which character within the story, so I generally read the stories in my own voice. I now would like to pretend that I've been asked why I started this show. That's a great question. Thank you for asking. The idea started to manifest itself after listening to the song Sons and Daughters by the band The Decemberists. As I listened to the song, a story played in my mind. I thought, man, I could totally write a video for this song. The song itself concludes with the lines, "Here all the bombs fade away," repeated over and over, and I thought of a scene as it played. That scene in my head, when put on paper, would eventually become the end of episode 2, A Minute from Freedom. I started to think about all the people affected by war. We tend to put a lot of focus on those fighting the war, and rightfully so, but in the end, they're not the only ones affected. There are the parents who watch their sons march off to war and their daughters to factories or field hospitals. There are engineers who attempt to not only solve critical problems on the battlefield, but also create the next wave of technology on the home front. There are the politicians and bureaucrats who are diligently working to keep the men on the front line supplied with equipment, food, and other much-needed supplies. There are the innocent, those who have no involvement but yet feel the effects by constant fear, food shortages, displacement, and sometimes death. And finally, there are the powers that be, the king, the Tsar, the Kaiser, all of which were first cousins, by the way, whose stubbornness and egos brought forth the chaos in the first place. Together we will explore stories from all walks of life, people from all corners of the globe who either fought, sent loved ones to fight, or who were affected in the many other ways one can be affected by the chaos of war. Sometimes I'm asked, why World War I? Well, because World War I is fascinating to me. So many things had to go wrong for that war to happen. At that time, there were so many alliances between particular countries and political tension was very high. All it took was one match to ignite the political powder keg that was Europe. I also became fascinated with World War I because of all of the advancements and firsts that arose from the chaos of that war. From medical advancements to the use of aircraft to the use of tanks, the First World War was a major catalyst in the creation of many items or procedures that are still used today. It's also been my contention that there would have been no World War II without World War I. Not just in the naming either. If that corporal was not laid up in the hospital when the armistice was signed, If that corporal did not blame a certain segment of the German population for what he saw as a betrayal in the surrender, it's possible that he never would have done what he did. Now, I started doing this by listing all of the countries that had participated in the war, either on their own or because they were forced to by whichever crown they then served. Then I started writing. Now, if you're an astute listener and you've listened to the first 3 episodes, then you've realized that the 3 are connected. One singular event in one episode deeply affected the lives of people in the other 2 episodes. I wish I could tell you, the listener, that all of these stories share a connection in one way or another, but they do not. As of now, just those 3 episodes share a common connection. That does not mean that I won't connect some future episodes. It just means that so far, it has not happened in any of the other stories that I have already written and will be recording in the near future. We want to hear a little bit about you. About me? Okay, since you asked so politely. I was born into a military family in the early 1970s. I have 2 brothers, one older, one younger. Being in a military family comes with one common thread. You move. A lot. And move a lot we did. From Oklahoma to Washington, D.C. to Montana. We did our share of moving. My parents were divorced when I was around 10 years old, and my brothers and I would primarily live with our mother. With our mother, we would live in Montana, then Utah, and finally, Nevada. We all took different paths as we grew. My older brother would go on to serve in the U.S. Army for 23 years. I would work fast food and eventually enter the manufacturing sector, and our younger brother would work in grocery until finally finding his own way into the manufacturing sector as well. I am a married father of 4 and a proud grandfather of 2. I still work in the manufacturing world, and as you can see, I write and podcast in my free time. I like to camp and travel when I can, but I also like to lounge around the house watching TikTok videos or watching a baseball game. When I turned 21, I made the mistake of having my first drink. It was a beer, but that started me down the road of drinking daily for almost 30 years. I recently quit, and I'm on my 86th day of sobriety as I record this. I hope you enjoyed this little sneak peek into the man that is me and the podcast that is World War I Stories. If you want to know more about me or have comments about the show, simply search up the Henny B on TikTok. If you ask me a question on one of my videos, I'll be sure to answer it. Once again, I'm extremely thankful for all of you who have listened and enjoyed this podcast. Please be sure to share the podcast when you can and comment, rate the show wherever you get your podcast from. And yes, I am open to ideas and suggestions. Thank you for listening to World War I Stories, where history comes alive through the voices of those who lived it. I'm Henny B, your host and storyteller. Please like and subscribe, and maybe even leave a review for us wherever you find your podcasts. And join us again for more World War I Stories.